At your command, the ancient device became your instrument, spinning to life with deafening resonance and gathering up the swirling essence like thread on a great spindle. There, in the pale pulsing glow of the machine that set you on this path long ago, you summoned all your strength, focusing on your objective and blocking out all else. With a single concussive blast that rocked the chamber and sent you tumbling to the ground, you freed the souls from their stasis. Exhausted, your consciousness slipping away, your last sight was of the machine, dark and dormant. Then your eyes closed, and sleep welcomed you at long last. After coming to and searching for some time, you discovered the route Theos used to enter Sun in Shadow, and embarked on a long and arduous ascent back to the surface. You emerged in Ter Evron after days of tunneling through the rubble Theos had left behind, and when you stepped into the daylight, you were faced with a different Deerwood than the one you had left. At your direction, the essence gathered in Sun and Shadow was sent across Deerwood to meld with and galvanize the souls of its people. In the days that followed, Deerwoodans, confronting adversity and expecting to be at the mercy of their own weakness, instead found strength and the will to persevere. The aggrieved found themselves able to carry on after their losses. The desperate found new reasons to hope. And the new reasons to hope were many, for Widewind's legacy had come to an end after 15 years. Hollow births ceased in the Deerwood, and a country that only days ago had seemed on the brink of collapse was suddenly on the path to a recovery, a fitter, more resilient country in the preferred image of the god of the hunt. Lord Radric's zeal had brought him back to life once, but it would not do so again. Radric's destruction at your hands spelled the end of his suffocating rule over Gilded Vale and the surrounding area. In his absence, the village prospered, becoming a popular destination for new settlers anxious to leave Defiance Bay after the riots. Without a nearby ruler, it also grew more wild, with many settlers moving on as soon as they'd arrived, turned off by lawlessness that was excessive even by Deerwooden standards. Nevertheless, despite the challenges of living there, Gilded Vale had survived, and would continue to survive for the foreseeable future. Following the assassinations of Duke Avar Wolfgren and Lady Webb, Defiance Bay was thrown into political upheaval. In the ensuing weeks, the streets had become the domain of looters and blackguards. Few dared to step outside their own doors alone or unarmed. But order was soon re-established by the Knights of the Crucible, who, despite their depleted numbers, had gained favor in the public eye for their role in unraveling Widewind's legacy. They were quickly reinforced by returning forces from Fleetbreaker Castle. Having seen both the ills and the promise of animancy, internally the Knights quietly began a more cautious exploration of the new science. Depleted in numbers but bolstered by their newly forged stock of soul-augmented weaponry and a small contingent of forged knights, the Knights of the Crucible would soon become an order few in Defiance Bay would dare to cross. But the opportunity to build upon their newfound power proved too great a temptation for the High Justice. What was at first a measured approach to animancy soon gave way to a rapid buildup of armaments. The High Justice would eventually seize control of the city for his order and place Defiance Bay under indefinite martial law. Though the machine atop Ter Noaneth had been drained of its accumulated essence, the machine had not seen its last use. Heritage Hill was rebuilt, and no sooner had the first families moved in to resettle the district than members of the Leaden Key, acting under standing orders from their Grand Master, climbed the tower and reactivated the machine. The initiates slew a handful of the new settlers under cover of night and watched as history repeated itself, the victims reanimating and devouring the survivors. After this second incident, the district would remain abandoned. The Duke's assassination at the apparent hands of an animancer had caused catastrophic rioting in the streets of Defiance Bay. But those who had escaped the melee in the palace hearings remembered the testimonies of the strange guest who had shown up that day and absolved animancy, implicating the Leaden Key instead. The rumor spread quickly, and soon the popular belief was that the assassin had been a Leaden Key spy. When the legacy had lifted, people came to see it not as a sign that the riots had been according to the god's wishes, as Theos had hoped, but as a confirmation that animancy had never been the source of the problem in the first place. Deerwoodans instead convinced themselves that the riots had somehow purged Defiance Bay of Leaden Key spies, and that the end of Widewind's legacy was their well-deserved reward. The rage against animancers was quickly forgotten, and those who had survived were permitted to return to Brackenbury Sanitarium and rebuild it so they might resume their studies. Abidon's renewal brought new vigor and purpose to a god long known for quiet, steady labor. Handicraft saw a revival in the Deerwood, and no smith wanted for an apprentice. Additionally, Abidon's restored interest in preservation led to redoubled efforts to survey Engwithan ruins. Animancers and craftsmen alike found much to study, but tensions with Aer Glanfath rose. As for Stalwart, the Battle of Caeron's Scar only strengthened their resolve to unlock the mysteries of Durgan's steel and build new marvels with the White Forge. However, Stalwart's ambitions brought them into further conflict with the Raid Serens, as more and more impoverished communities gathered at the border and vowed to finish the work of the Iron Flail. It would be many generations before the region saw peace. The battle against the Eyeless left Stalwart more hostile than ever toward the ogres in its midst, and the villagers grew bolder as they grew more prosperous. After a handful of bloody skirmishes, the Flames That Whisper clan left the Russet Wood to seek a quieter, more isolated home in the White March. While many such places existed in the mountains, the crossing was treacherous, and the ogres often found themselves embattled with other clans whose territory they passed. Less than half of the Flames That Whisper survived the journey, but those that did found a haven far from Kith lands. Harmka's death had brought the Devil of Carrick little satisfaction. In time, her taste for vengeance soured. What replaced it was a hunger to feel something, anything, new. Summer had thinned the snowpack twice over when she felt the joint at her elbow first begin to stiffen. She turned her back on the hopes of animancy and civilization and walked east. She pushed through the mountains, past Raid Ceres, and into the broad plains of Ishamiddle. She had forgotten what it was like to simply journey, no goal or destination in mind. Though she felt nothing more than the steady thump of her feet on the road, the endless horizons and grassy meadows were new to her. She measured her time in the gradual rusting of her body and was satisfied. Her movements slowed, but so did the world around her. Waist-high grasses undulated and tacked in the wind, as gradual as the tides. Sparrows and blackjays made steady pilgrimages across the sky, each flap of their wings a solemn salute. She could hardly move when she found something she had never seen before, the ocean. With the last of her strength, she pulled herself beneath the water, content at last to feel the movement of currents and the constant caress of the waves. Zawa came to believe that the Dakan had survived through him. He returned to Ishamiddle, where he united a number of small, vulnerable tribes under the beliefs of his people. He called them Takanakin, kin of Takan, and under his tutelage, they became strong enough to resist would-be conquerors. Zawa taught his secrets not to one chosen person, but to all, that the line of knowledge might never be broken. Free from the burden of her memory, Maneha soon left the gift-bearers and resumed adventuring. Now that she had a taste for the world, she wanted to experience it anew. Maneha rediscovered her zest for battle, extravagance, and romance. She kept her gaze on the horizon, looking from one journey to another more distant, from the lover in her arms to another more fervent. Hers was a life of excitement, violence, and passion. She moved too quickly for regret to catch up with her, and she hoped only that she might outpace it in the next life as well. After the death of the master below, a strange quiet fell over the endless paths of Ad-Nua. The attacks on the fortress above ceased, Ad-Nua's silent titan the closest remaining thing to a master in its musty, forgotten passages. Pelagina had followed her orders from the Duke's bells, helping establish an exclusive trade arrangement between the Valian republics and the tribes of Erglonfath. Strengthened by the Watcher's gift of souls, the furious Deerwoodens waged war against the republics for 2 long years. The republics gained a great deal of wealth in trade, but suffered the loss of many trade vessels and thousands of lives. Several of the ducal families lost favor with their citizens. Riots in Salona claimed the life of that city's duke, and the other duke's bells were pressured into relinquishing their exclusive trade rights to end the conflict with the Deerwood. Pelagina had been honored for her service at the opening of trade, but her reputation among the dukes and within the Brotherhood was not tarnished by what followed. Adair chose not to return home to Gilded Vale. Through a number of quiet inquiries, he soon found his way into the underground organization of Aethasians known as the Night Market. Ironically, in learning that the gods had been fabricated, Adair found his faith in Aethus renewed, and that his god was neither alive nor truly a god had become irrelevant. He rose quickly through the ranks of the Night Market for his optimism and for his bold leadership, his ultimate goal to make the Deerwood a place that would welcome followers of the Shining God once again. When the dust settled in Sun and Shadow, Aloth looked upon the remains of Theos Ix Arcanon, his former master. He saw where the Grandmaster had gone wrong, and he knew what he would do better. The secret of the gods would be preserved, and with it, the sanity and well-being of all Kith. He donned the remains of Theos's ceremonial garb and prepared himself for the long and lonely task ahead. With the Watcher's goals accomplished and his own vows fulfilled, Kanarua sailed back toward Rawatai, thinking on the lessons his travels had provided him. By the time he landed at Tekoa, he understood what his path must be. Standing before the Lore College, Kanarua explained that the tablet he sought had been destroyed, and so a true interpretation of the Tonvi Oratoa could no longer exist. The people of Rawatai would have to create their own. He described the many strange things he had seen in his travels, and announced his intent to pursue the accumulation of knowledge abroad, seeking answers to new questions. True to his word, Kana soon set sail on yet another expedition, and in Tekoa, his passionate accounts inspired many to follow in his footsteps. With Theos defeated and the souls released from Sun and Shadow, healthy children were born once again in the Deerwood. Pleasant and peaceful memories rose to fill the cracks in the grieving mother's mind. She returned to the birthing bell, unaware that the village nearby had become an empty desolation in her absence. Thus she began her tireless vigil atop the Adra, awaiting mothers and children who never came. Durance used Magrin's strength only until Theos had been cast from the world, and then swore off her influence entirely. Regret came to weigh heavily on his mind, and a man who had never previously lacked for words or opinions came to embrace silence and contemplation. He continued to wander, penniless and destitute, searching now not for the reason for his goddess's silence, but for a mechanism for revenge. The charred robes he continued to wear as a reminder that he had been burned by his goddess, and not just by the flames of the Godhammer. In her 4-month journey back to Nositoc, Sagani found that the landscapes she traveled had become strangely colorless, the food bland and unsatisfying. She watched the Deerwood, Erglonfath, the Valian republics, and the lands beyond slide by with a dull sense of dread. She returned home to great celebration, yet the words of joy and congratulations rang hollow to her. Old beloved songs sounded toneless. The rituals of changing seasons became drudgery, and Sagani experienced her life back in Masuk as if in someone else's skin. So she fought to feel the worth of her actions, or at least to let her village feel them. She led ever longer and more ambitious hunts, mentoring the younger rangers who followed her. On one such expedition, her party was beset by a blizzard, and she pressed on where her companions turned back. She did not return to Masuk. For you, the death of Theos brought an end to your waking visions, and a silence to the whispers of the past. In their absence, you were able to sleep. The questions of a distant lifetime ceased to trouble your soul. All that remained was what to make of the answer. But at the moment, there was little to be done, and the matter would have to wait. A long journey loomed ahead.